Big lesson number one. Big lesson number one. Big lesson. Big lesson number one. Big lesson number one.
Big lesson number one.
Big lesson
All
number
the time
one.
travel
All
in
the
the
time
world
travel in the
can't
world
make
can
someone
make
love you.
someone love you.
Big lesson number
Big
one.
lesson number one.
All the time travel in the world
travel in
can't
the
make
world
someone
can
love you.
make
Big lesson number
number
one.
one.
All the time travel in the world can't make someone love you. Big lesson number one. All the time travel in the world can't make someone love you. Big lesson number one. All the time travel in the world can't make someone love you. So the love of my life just drove away. And the very next day, it was my turn to leave. So the love of my life just drove away. And the very next day, it was my turn to leave. So the love of my life just drove away. And the very next day, it was my turn to leave. So the love of my life just drove away. And the very next day, it was my turn to leave. So the love of my life just drove away. And the very next day, it was my turn to leave.
And the very next day, 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 it was my turn to leave. 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 And the very next day, the very next day, and the very next day. 그리고 그 다음 날은 내가 떠날 차례였다. 그리고 그 다음 날은 내가 떠날 차례였다. And the very next day, and the very next day, and the very next day. 그 다음 날은. And the next day, and the very next day, and the very next. And the very next day, and the very next day, it was my turn to read.
There you go.
There you
Spend
go.
it all at once.
Don't spend all.
There you go.
There you go.
Spend it all at once.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go. There you go. Don't spend it all at once.
Spend it all at once.
Don't spend it all at once. Thanks.
There you go.
There you go. There you go. Here you are. There you go. 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 Don't spend it all at once. Don't spend it at all. Don't spend. There you go. There you go. Don't spend it all at once. Don't spend it all at once. At one. At one. At once. Or at one. 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 Don't spend it all at once. Or at once. Don't spend it all at once. Here you go. Don't spend it all at once. Here you go. Don't spend it all at once. There you go. Don't spend it all at once. Don't spend it all at once. There you go. There you go. There you go. There you go. Don't spend it all at once. There you go. Don't spend it all at once.
Spend it all at once.
At once.
There you go.
There you go.
Spend it all at once.
Don't spend it all at once. Don't spend it all. Don't spend it all at once. Don't spend it. Don't spend it all at once. Don't spend it all. Don't spend it all. Don't spend it all. Don't spend it all at once. Don't spend it. Don't spend it all at once.
Don't call too often, your mother.
Don't call too often. Don't call too often. Your mother doesn't like to be disturbed.
Doesn't like to be disturbed. Okay.
Don't call
too often, your mother doesn't
Don't
like to
call
be disturbed.
don't call too often. Your mother doesn't like to be disturbed. Don't call too often. Don't call too often. Your mother doesn't like to be disturbed. Don't call too often. Don't call too often. Your mother doesn't like to be disturbed.
Okay. Don't call too often, your mother doesn't like to be disturbed.
Your mother doesn't like to be disturbed.
Don't call true when your mother doesn't like to be disturbed.
Okay.
Okay.
Don't call true when your mother doesn't like to be disturbed.
Okay. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with
I was staying in St. John's Wood near Abbey Road
a playwright friend of my dad's called
with a playwright friend. 극작가 친구인 playwright friend with the playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. My dad's called Harry with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry.
Harry. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. It's always nice to have family connections when you're a new kid in town. It's always nice to have family connections when you're a new kid in town. It's always nice to have family connections when you're a new kid in town. It's always nice to have family connections when you're a new kid in town. It's always nice to have family.
It's always nice to have family connection when you're a new kid in town. It's already nice to have a friend. It's already nice to have family connection. It's already nice to have a family connection. It's already nice to have. It's already nice to have a family connection when you are a new kid in town. It's already nice to. It's already nice to have a family connection. It's always nice to. It's already nice to have family connection when you're a new kid in town. When you are a new kid in town. It's already nice to have a family connection when you are a new kid in town.
Family connections when you're a new kid in town. I'm James's son.
I'm James's who?
James Lake.
What about
James
him?
Lake. What about him? What about him?
I'm James's son.
I'm James's son. I'm James's son.
James Lake.
What about him?
What about him?
I'm James's son.
James
Lake.
What about him?
James
I'm
Lake.
James's son.
James's son. Who?
James Lake.
James
What about him?
What about him?
I'm James's son.
James's son. Who?
James Lake.
What
James
about
Lake.
He said you had a room.
He said you had a room.
Come there and wait.
He said you had a room.
He said you had a room.
Come there and wait.
He said you had a room.
He said you had a room.
Come there and wait.
He said you had a room.
And wait.
Come there and wait.
And wait.
He said you had a room.
He said you had a room. He said you had a
Come
room.
there
Going there
and wait. Quietly. I mean it. Don't make a sound.
Don't make a sound.
Or I'll kill
Or I
you.
or I
Quietly.
or
I mean it. Don't make a sound.
don't make a sound.
Or I'll
Or I
kill
kill
you.
you.
Quietly.
Quietly. I mean it to make a sound. I mean it to make a sound. I mean it to make a sound.
I mean it. Don't make a sound.
I mean it to make a sound. I mean it to make a sound. I mean it to make a sound. Quietly. I mean it to make a sound. I mean it. I mean it to make a sound.
or I'll kill you.
Or
Quietly, I mean
I
it, don't
mean
make
it
a
to make a
sound.
sound. Or I
Or
will
I'll
kill
kill
you.
you.
I will kill you. I will kill you.
Quietly, I mean it, don't make a sound.
To make a sound.
Or
Or
I'll
I'll
kill
kill
you.
you. Or I'll kill you.
Big lesson number
Big
one.
next number one.
All the time
All
travel in the
time
world
travel in the
can't make
can
someone
make
love
someone
you.
love
Big lesson number
Lesson
one.
number one.
All the time travel in the world can't make someone love you. Big lesson number one. All the time travel in the world can't make someone love you. Big lesson number one.
Lesson number one.
All the time travel in the world can't make someone love you. Big lesson number one. All the time travel in the world can't make someone love you. So the love of my life just drove away. And the very next day, it was my turn to leave. So the love of my life just drove away. And the very next day, it was my turn to leave. So the love of my life just drove away. And the very next day, it was my turn to leave. So the love of my life just drove away. And the very next day, it was my turn to leave. So the love of my life just drove away. And the very next day, it was my turn to leave.
It was my turn to leave.
Spend it all at once. There you go. Spend it all at once. There you go.
There you go.
Spend it all at once.
At once.
There you go.
There you go. Don't
Spend
spend
it
it
all
all
at
at
once.
once. Don't spend it at once.
There you
Spend
go.
it or
Spend it all at once.
spend it or
Don't call too often, your mother doesn't like you to stop.
Okay. Don't call too much.
Don't call too often, your mother doesn't like you to stop.
Okay. Don't
Don't
call
call too often, your mother doesn't
your
like you to
mother
stop.
Okay.
Don't call too often, your mother doesn't like you to stop.
Okay.
Don't call too often, your mother doesn't like you
Don't
to
call
stop.
too often. Don't call too often. Don't call too often.
I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. It's always nice to have family connections when you're a new kid in town. It's always nice to have family connections when you're a new kid in town. It's always nice to have family connections when you're a new kid in town. It's always nice to have family connections when you're a new kid in town. It's always nice to have family connections when you're a new kid in town. I'm James's son.
Who?
James Lake.
What about him?
I'm James's son.
I'm James's son.
James Lake.
What about him?
I'm James's son.
Who?
James Lake.
What about him?
I'm James's son.
Who?
James Lake.
What about him?
I'm James's son.
I'm James's son. I'm James's son.
James Lake.
What about him?
Right?
He said you had a room.
Who said you had a room? You had a room.
Go in there
Quiet.
and wait.
He said you had a room.
He said you had a
Go
room.
in there and
He
wait.
said you had a room.
He said you had a room.
He said you had a room. He said
Go
you had a
in
room.
there and
He
wait.
said you had a room.
He said you had a room.
He said you had a
Go
room.
in there
He said
and
you
wait.
had a room.
He said you had a room.
He said you had a room. You had a
Go
room.
in there
He
and
said you
wait.
had a room.
Quietly.
Why?
I mean it,
I
don't make a
need to
sound.
make a sound or kill you. Or I kill you.
Quietly.
Quietly,
mean it,
I
don't
mean
make a
to
sound.
make a sound or I
Or I'll
kill
kill
you.
Quietly. I mean it, don't make a
to
sound.
make any sound. I mean,
Or I'll kill you.
quietly,
Quietly. I mean it, don't make a sound.
sounds or I'll kill you.
Quietly. I mean it, don't make a sound. Or I'll kill you.
Or I'll kill you.
Big lesson number one.
Lesson number one.
All the time travel in the world can't make someone love you. Big lesson number one. All the time travel in the world can't make someone love you. Big lesson number one. All the time travel in the world can't make someone love you. Big lesson number one. All the time travel in the world can't make someone love you. Big lesson number
Can't
one.
make someone love
All
you.
the time travel in the world can't make someone love you. So the love of my life just drove away.
Drove away.
And the very next
And
day,
the very next
it was my turn
it
to
was my
leave.
turn to leave.
So the love of my life just drove away.
Drove away.
And the very next
And
day,
the very
it was
next
my
day
turn to
it was
leave.
my turn to leave.
So the love of my life just drove away.
Drove away.
And the very next
And the
day,
very next day
it was my turn to
it was my
leave.
turn to leave.
So the love of my life
None of
just
my
drove
turn
away.
drove away.
And the very next
And
day,
the very next
it was
day
my turn to
it was
leave.
my turn.
So the love of my life just drove
It was my
away.
turn to leave. It was my turn to leave.
And the very next day,
Very next day
it was my turn to leave.
leave. It was my
There
turn
you
to
go.
leave.
Spend it all at once.
There you go. Don't spend it at don't
There
spend
you
it
go.
or at once.
Spend it all at once.
Don't spend it.
There you go. Spend it all at once.
Don't spend it at all.
There you go. Spend it all at once. There you go.
There you go.
Spend it all at once. Don't call too often, your mother doesn't like to be disturbed. Don't call too often, your mother doesn't like to be disturbed. Don't call too often, your mother doesn't like to be disturbed.
Your mother doesn't like to
Don't call too often, your mother doesn't like to be disturbed. Don't call too often, your mother doesn't like to be disturbed. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. I was staying in St John's Wood near Abbey Road with a playwright friend of my dad's called Harry. It's always nice to have family connections when you're a new kid in town. It's always nice to have family connections when you're a new kid in town. It's always nice to have family connections when you're a new kid in town. It's always nice to have family connections when you're a new kid in town. It's always nice to have family connections when you're a new kid in town. I'm James's son.
I'm James's son. I'm
James Lake?
What about it?
I'm James's
I'm
son.
James's son.
I'm James's son. I'm
James
James's
Lake?
son.
What about it?
I'm James's son.
James's son.
He's
James
my
Lake?
son. He's
What about
Jungkook's son.
James's son.
I'm James's son. I'm James.
James Lake?
What
James
about it?
Lake. What about
I'm
him?
James's
What about
son.
him? What about him? What about him?
James Lake?
What about
James,
it?
what about
He said you had a
He
room.
said you had a room. He said you had a room.
Go in there and wait.
And
He said you had a room.
he said
Go
he
in there
said
and
you had a
wait.
room.
He said you had a room.
He said you had a room.
Go in there and wait.
He said you had a room.
Go in there and wait.
He said you had a room.
He said you had a room.
Go in there and wait. Quietly. I mean it. Don't make a sound, or I'll kill you. Quietly. I mean it. Don't make a sound, or I'll kill you. Quietly. I mean it. Don't make a sound, or I'll kill you. Quietly. I mean it. Don't make a sound, or I'll kill you. Quietly. I mean it. Don't make a sound, or I'll kill you.